Do you ever want to dive deeper into the Bible, but you just don't know where to begin? Or struggle to feel like you even have the time? When you read the Bible, do you get frustrated because you know there's so much more in there? You just have no clue how to get it out? Or maybe you want to know the Bible better, and you're looking for any resource to help. Then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to the Context and Color of the Bible podcast. We're sisters. I'm Veronica.
I'm Erica.
And we love to study the Bible and help others understand it better. When it comes to our own study of Scripture, we have found that in bringing back the context of Scripture, it adds to our understanding. It actually adds color to the black and white pages of the text. We're coming to the end of Esther, Air.
Our movie's almost done.
I know. It's always kind of sad to come to the end of a study.
Right.
As you've gotten close to the people and you go...
Enjoyed the story.
Mm-hmm. Now, if we had recorded this podcast a week ago, it would have been like, oh no, we're coming to the end of Esther. What are we doing next?
Oh, but we've sat down.
We unintentionally sat down and had a little...
powwow.
Yep. So we actually have between now and...
Lord willing, Christmas?
Yeah, figure it out,
year,
like next Christmas. So we're kind of excited going in and having the whole year planned out.
Right.
We have some really exciting things coming down, podcasts coming, new things.
Some things we really feel like God's been putting on our
teachings.
hearts. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. To share with people.
Yes. So we are no longer panicking of what's coming after Esther.
Nope.
But we have at least two more podcasts on Esther. So we're not going to start announcing that all yet. But just know, finish up Esther so you can join us for the next.
That's right. Don't lollygag behind.
Yes. But, all right, Erica, we are in Esther 8.
Right.
We kind of left off last week. The doors had closed. Haman was removed.
Being taken to the gallows.
But we wanted everyone to remember it didn't end the problem.
Right.
Haman's gone.
But the evil still remains.
Mm-hmm. And so as we open up to Esther 8, we've moved out of the king's palace garden.
Yeah.
The banquet, wherever they all had kind of met up and been. And we've jumped then.
Yeah.
Are we picturing them at the throne room? The king's kind of sitting on his throne.
Right. And you said you created that scene that I can totally see it. You've got Esther and Mordecai in front of the throne kind of pacing back and forth. Mm-hmm. And the
worrying about this decree.
Right. You know, I think you said like Mordecai's got the decree in his hand and he's reading it over and over again, trying to find a legal loophole for the Jewish people. Because in how many months they're still going to be slaughtered.
Right.
And the king's just kind of sitting back watching.
Right. Well, he's kind of used to letting other people make his decisions. He realizes, something needs to be done.
And I'm gonna approve of it. I just don't want to deal with the what's of it.
Because if anything, Esther's kind of like still crying, going, but my people, me.
Right.
We're still going to be annihilated.
Right. She's like,
Fix this.
I'm your queen and I'm Jewish. And so unless you want to find a new queen in so many months, you've got to help my people. She identifies completely with them. And so their suffering is her suffering. And the king's got to do something for his queen to not suffer. But he doesn't want to think of it.
Right, because he's not used to thinking of it. He's used to the ideas just being given to him. So it's like, okay, figure it out, you two. And so that pressure is on. Right. Because truthfully, for the Jews, one of my commentaries said, the Jews have never had the luxury to ask why they have enemies. They've always had enemies.
Which is amazing. Absolutely amazing when you think about it.
And this is one of the biggest enemies they've ever had because it's annihilation of their entire people.
Right.
And so think of the pressure. I mean, you can totally see just Mordecai and Esther walking back and forth and almost one going, I've got an idea. No, it's not going to work. And then a little bit longer, another one goes, I've got it.
Oh, no.
Nope, never mind.
Right.
And then finally we do see Mordecai come up with an idea.
And he's like, wait a minute. I know right now with Haman's decree still being out there, all the people think the palace is behind the enemy of the Jewish people. But what if we give the Jewish people the right to defend themselves and let everybody know the palace has switched sides. There's been an upset in the government, and we are now for the Jewish people. It will make people think twice before they decide to attack the Jewish people, and we give the Jewish people the right to defend themselves. And the king and Esther are like, yes,
right.
That's the best way to handle it, because you can't reverse a decree, because then that makes the king look bad. Like, whoops, this was a mistake. We shouldn't have said this.
I can't take it back.
But I can let you know I've switched sides. I was against you. Now I'm for you. So Mordecai calls in the scribes. And so he's reading Haman's decree. And then just taking all of these comments and statements from Haman's decree, and putting them in his decree. So it's this reversal,
right,
is what's happening. We had the bad decree, now we're taking it and reversing it, but we're using the same language, and now we're going to put it out against the bad guys. The Jewish people can do exactly to the bad guys what the enemies were going to do to the Jewish people. They have the right to defend themselves, to kill women and children, to plunder their enemies' goods. It's just taken exactly from Haman's, word for word almost.
It's almost like Mordecai went through the decree and scratched off where it says kill the Jews.
Right.
He put the enemies.
Right.
And then where it said the enemies, he scratched it off and wrote the Jews.
Right, exactly. So you're supposed to see it as a reversal. But not only is it a reversal, Veronica, it supersedes the reversal.
Right.
Because in the Hebrew, if Haman's group went out on steeds, royal steeds, this group, the new decree goes out on even bigger and better royal steeds. And if Haman's decree went out in haste, this went out in urgent haste, so it took months. I think you said 3 months?
I think 3 months is what I read.
In the commentary.
To go from one end of the kingdom to the other.
So this is the scene that we were laughing about.
Well, you kind of have like Mordecai reading his
reading
new
the new
decree. But it's like a voiceover, and so what you see is these bigger and better, brighter horses,
the pure white stallions,
faster ones running out, and you're watching as they're catching up, and they're right behind the first group that went out.
From Haman's decree.
Right.
So, Haman's group is smaller. They're tired. They've been out for months.
They're dirtier.
They're dirty. Their clothes are torn and ragged. And they get up and they read their decree, and they're used to people booing, and they're used to, people being upset. So they're kind of like, blah, 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 to kill, destroy, annihilate the Jewish people, blah, blah, blah. And, the listeners are like, oh, okay, we're against Jews. Boo Jews, boo Jews. And then right after Haman's decree is read, he sits down, and the new decree comes out, and it's this.
He's brighter, he's cleaner, he looks fresher.
And everybody cheers for him. So he comes up and he's like, and you, the Jewish people, get to defend and destroy and annihilate your enemies. And everybody's like, oh, now we're for the Jews. Yay, Jews. It's this comedic. Oh, okay, we're against Jews. Oh, okay, we're for Jews. And the decree for Mordecai is given more glory and more honor. And it not only reverses Haman's decree, but it supersedes it, which means Mordecai supersedes Haman in every way. And so you see this scene as the city is rejoicing as these new decrees are going out.
And you just have that feel of, because again, this is a story that's supposed to be told throughout the generations with children, and you're supposed to celebrate the bad guy's downfall.
Yes.
So it is a big, over the top.
Everybody's happy. Everybody's rejoicing.
Yeah. And so then, Erica, so we have that going out. I'm looking in my notes.
And Mordecai, while you still hear the cheering in the background, we switch back to the palace, and you see Mordecai dressed in all this finery. He's now in the king's presence, and you realize the camera focuses in on Mordecai's finger, Veronica. And he's wearing the king's signet ring, and you realize he has now become second in command. And as he's walking the halls of the palace, the people are cheering him, and they're just so thankful to be rid of that horrible Haman. And now they have this good Mordecai Mordecai, and you watch as he walks through the palace. And then, Veronica, where does he go? He goes to
Haman's house. It's like he's taken over Haman's mansion, and you see almost like Haman's name has been crossed off quickly, and Mordecai's has been scratched in.
Yes.
Because again, you want the idea of that reversal.
Yes.
Haman seemed to be winning. Haman seemed to be on the top of the world.
And he's
gone. And here's Mordecai.
And all of Haman's old servants who looked tired and bedraggled before are now healthy and clean, and they're cheering for their new master as he comes walking into the palace. Yay! We've got a good master finally, and we're so glad to be rid of that horrible Haman, and he treated us terribly, and he didn't feed us, and he worked us to death, and now we've got a master that will take care of us and provide for us. And
it's almost like the angels singing when Mordecai walks by, like, oh.
Yes.
They're all it's just a complete reversal where the palace seemed dark and dingy when Haman walked through. When Mordecai walks through,
it's bright.
There's light and just joy, and birds are chirping.
Yes. And as he goes in, you see Mordecai walk into his new mansion and pulls out a Torah scroll, and he jumps to Proverbs 11:10 and reads, "When the righteous prosper, the city exalts. When the wicked perish, there are shouts of joy." And you hear those shouts of joy being scattered throughout the city.
Right.
As people realize the rule of the wicked Haman is done, and Mordecai is succeeding, and he is righteous, and so the city's going to prosper, and it's a good thing. But we still have
a problem
because that day still has to come, the 13th of Adar.
Right.
What's going to happen on that day? So as things are settling down, you see Mordecai doing normal business stuff, but you watch the month as the calendar.
Well, you're watching as different people are turning that calendar, and the look of tension and apprehension of, okay, we have 2 decrees out there.
Right.
What's going to happen? How does this all play out? Those 2 decrees are in opposition.
Right.
So did they just cancel each other out and everyone goes, it's not worth it? Or are there still people who go, I'm going to try.
Right.
I've been seeing some things.
Right.
I would because again, the whole idea with that decree that Mordecai wrote, the Jews were living set apart.
They were obviously different.
They were different. They had their own language. This was not a group that had completely assimilated into that culture. So yes, there's I believe a remnant that's gone back.
Yes, by this point. Yeah.
At this point. But there are still Jews who are living differently, because the idea, when I'm going to go on a little tangent here, when God gave the law, the Torah, to Moses, it wasn't a bunch of rules, just here's how to be saved, here's how to please me. It was, here's how to look different.
Yes. Yep.
Here's how to be set apart from the rest of the world. And that was kind of where we took Esther in the beginning. Esther had this, what do I do when I go into the palace? Do I honor Sabbath? Do I eat kosher? She was stuck with, do I blend in?
Right.
Or do I stick out? And we've talked about how we watched Daniel and his friends. They chose not to blend in.
Right. Right.
Esther, I don't know if she could do it covertly or if she just tried to blend in. And again,
Mordecai told her, hide that you're Jewish. So that meant
that's
she
true.
blended in.
And so we've had that where we've watched Esther, but obviously the rest of the Jews throughout the kingdom were living different.
Right.
People could look at them and go, you're a Jew.
Yes.
You look differently. And we need to ask ourselves that. If this were to happen today,
would people be able to
if it was followers of the King,
Yep.
followers of the Messiah Jesus,
Yep.
do you look different?
Right.
That's kind of that.
Right.
There's some small little things in here we can turn and go, I need to ask myself.
Right. Right.
How would I be identified? How would I be labeled?
Right.
And then another thing, as we look at that, I did want to point out, we kind of back at verse 9 where it talks about the 23rd day of the 3rd month. That's actually 70 days after the first decree.
Right.
And so you have this, again, just God has a calendar.
Yes.
Yep. The dates Haman even picked was not by accident. The day Haman decided to roll the dice.
Right.
God's got a calendar, and so we have from that decree 70 days later. And again, I'm sure most of our listeners know 70 is that idea of completion or perfection.
Yeah.
So you have it all coming together
at the right time.
At the right time.
Well, there's a Proverbs 16:33. The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. So it looked like a random chance that Haman just threw the lot, pick the right day for this people to die. I need my lucky day chosen. And yet the Bible admits, hey, it looks random, but every decision actually comes from the Lord. There's no randomness in God's kingdom.
Right.
The days matter, the details matter, the calendar matters. And we ignore that because we don't realize it.
Well, because it's hard sometimes on this side of the calendar.
Yes.
To see how it all worked together.
Yes, that's true.
So that's how chapter 8 kinds of ends. And as we get into chapter 9 then, Air, what's our picture? What's our scene?
Well, our first scene in chapter 9, we need to be reminded that Haman's 10 sons are still out there.
Right.
You know, just like this edict is still out there. Now we have 2 competing edicts. Haman's 10 sons are still out there. So we had thought, Veronica, about, opening with kind of a recap of, we see Haman's funeral.
Right.
And we see Haman's 10 sons at the funeral. And, they're
conspiring together almost.
They're just like their father, and they're conspiring like, we're going to take revenge on those Jews. We're going to take revenge on all the people that were against our father. We're going to kill Mordecai. We're going to take him down. And you see these 10 sons vowing together, like they're all every hand in. And then the very next scene, Veronica, you see Haman's tombstone.
Right.
And then right next to it, you see a line of 10 little Haman tombstones. And you're like, oh, yeah, that didn't go very well.
Didn't work out well.
10 did it. Like, boom, boom, boom. Haman Jr., Haman Jr. 1, Haman Jr. 2, Haman Jr. the 3rd, Haman Jr. the 4th, Haman Jr. the 5th, Haman Jr. the 6th. Actually, they have silly sounding names.
Right.
In the Hebrew, the names are comical and kind of make you laugh. But like, boom, 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 they're gone. They're done. And you need to be reminded, and maybe even on their tombstone, we could go back to that verse in, I think it's in Exodus, where God decrees an eternal war.
Oh, against the Amalekites.
And,
Exodus 17, I think.
I think so. And we're just reminded that with the death of Haman's sons, that is finished. What Saul didn't do, Mordecai.
You almost have that flashback as you're looking at those tombstones. On that tombstone, you see Saul and Samuel
and Agag
and the king.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you're wrapping it all up. You're tying a bow on it, going, you know what?
Right.
It's done.
Right.
What you didn't finish
is finally done. The Amalekites are gone. Their line has ended. They can no longer fight the Jewish people, God's people. And so you're not sad.
Right.
This is a good thing. We needed to wrap up that storyline in the Old Testament.
Right. Because you've got Saul from the tribe of Benjamin and Mordecai and Esther from the tribe of Benjamin. So you just see almost a connection and the bow being put on of, okay. It's all been fixed back.
They've undone what Saul didn't do. So it's a good thing. And now Haman's line has ended, and they can no longer be the baddies. But I found this quote as we go through chapter 9. It's good to be reminded, and I found this quote from my JPS commentary. Carnivals, it's not an exact quote, but the idea that carnivals are a bit scary. How many movies show murders taking place at carnivals or something else tragic? How many kids are afraid of clowns? Carnivals can be a lot of fun, but they're a creepy fun. So as we go through chapter 9, we can keep that kind of tension on. On the one hand, it's funny and it's silly, but on the other hand, there was that seriousness of they could have been wiped out.
Right.
There's a potential huge tragedy that could have happened.
But didn't.
And we see that finally coming to the end in chapter 9. And we had talked, Veronica, about in chapter 9 to set up the battle.
Right.
You see both sides preparing for war.
Mm-hmm. What you see is that calendar's flipping and you're getting closer. Reminded, it's getting closer to the day. You see the Jews getting ready. You see them preparing, pulling out their swords, whatever they're going to use. Right. You see young boys even trying to lift up their sword. Am I ready? Right. Am I big enough, strong enough to fight? You see old men pulling out their old armor, their old sword, seeing if their arms still have the strength. But on the other hand, as that calendar keeps slipping, you're seeing the enemies getting ready too. And that evil gleam in their eyes as they've been watching their neighbors. And
they're taking lists, what they want and who they want to kill.
And what's in the house. And when he's gone, I'm going to plunder this and I'm going to loot this. So you're constantly having this back and forth as each month passes, as we're getting closer to the month of Adar. And
one side's bigger.
The
enemy side is definitely, you see the massive group of people on their side, and they're training in an actual gym with an actual, sword fighter who's teaching them self-defense and how to fight. And the Jewish side is much smaller, and they're training in a courtyard, and they're, remember when we fought? Okay, I think this is what you do next, guys. I'm trying to remember. And their weapons are a bit more homemade, and so you're realizing it's kind of like a David and Goliath.
Yep.
For the Jewish people to defend themselves at all will be a miracle, because their group is a lot smaller, and the other side, they still have some strong connections. The king has thrown his weight in with the Jewish people, but he doesn't do a lot. So you've still got some big enemies out there of the Jewish people that are coming back.
Well, because there's still a minority within the kingdom.
Right.
You have every other tribe or people group in the kingdom.
And there's a whole lot more of them. And so you see these two sides, and then as they're preparing, as they're still practicing, Veronica, all of a sudden the screen kind of does this flip, and it kind of flips things around, and all of a sudden we're at the day of fighting.
Right.
The 13th of Adar is here, and we're fighting, Veronica. But what happened to the two sides?
Well, and as you're watching them fighting, you're having almost, because you've got to keep it lighter.
Right.
This is something to be celebrated. So you've got the Jew secretary yelling out, okay, no plundering. And they're like, yes. And check. And then no pilfering. Yes. Okay, check.
No killing women and children. Yep, we're not.
No unnecessary death.
Yes.
And so you have this, and then you've got the enemy's secretary standing up there pilfering, and they're like, yes, check. Plundering, yes, check. Excessive killing, yes. But as he's screaming that out, he's encouraging the troops and reminding them of their checklist of things they want to do.
Right.
You're watching more of the enemies fall.
Right.
And he's looking out, and somehow he's seeing, it's almost as if the battle's getting closer and closer. And it's almost comedic
guys, I'm just the scribe. And he turns and runs and drops his clipboard. And he runs away.
And so as you see this, and it's like, where did this come from that these Jews are overpowering?
Right. It's miraculous that they're, you see tons of enemies down, and you see just this small group of people that are still standing. And this another reversal that happened, the Jews that weren't supposed to be able to not only defended themselves, but were able to completely defend themselves. But unlike their enemies, the Jewish people don't plunder.
Right.
The Jewish people don't kill the women and children. They only go after.
This isn't about greed and lust and power.
The enemies were going to. They were after all of it. But for the Jewish people, this is just self-defense.
Right.
We're just killing the enemies that have been trying to hurt us all along.
Right. We're defending and protecting ourselves.
Right.
And so with that, it's the Jews showing them, even in battle, the Jews look different.
Right. Yes.
Even in how they defend themselves, they stick up for themselves.
Yes.
But it's all about security and self-defense.
Yes.
They still stand out from the nations around them.
And as you're watching the people fall, it's really like if you see Lord of the Rings with the orcs falling. You don't feel bad that the orcs are being destroyed. Or in Star Wars.
Right.
When the stormtrooper after stormtrooper falls, you don't it doesn't bother you because you don't see a face. They're faceless. You know, George Lucas, I learned, did that on purpose because it was easier to see a massive amount of death like that because it didn't bother you because there's not a person there. So that's the feeling you need when you picture the amount of dead that the numbers give us. Like, first of all, they're faceless. They're enemies. They're the bad guys. So you're not upset or concerned.
Right. You've been cheering for that underdog.
Right. You're thankful it happened. But second, it's not realistic. Like, right. The amount of party days in chapter 1 was an exaggeration. So 6 months of a party. Right. That was an over-the-top exaggeration. A year-long beauty treatment, over-the-top exaggeration. A 75-foot-high gallows, over-the-top exaggeration. You know, again, they're exaggerating and inflating the numbers. Right. That we just need this over-the-top victory that shows how massive and mighty our God is opposed to yours, God. This was something very common in writing back then. You always exaggerated the amount of enemy you killed because it just showed how more powerful you are. You know, so it fits the era, but it also fits the story. Everything's over the top and larger. So instead of like 10 bad guys, we kill 1,000,000 bad guys. Instead of Haman, we kill Haman's 10 sons. Like, all of this is still working towards that exaggeration we started with. Yeah.
Because again, this story is to be repeated throughout the centuries. And so you enjoy a story like that. It's a fun story to overtell. You want, as the kids are acting it out, for them to be over the top and dramatic.
Right. You can picture kids playing this out in like the dying scene. Oh, you know, I can totally picture my sons having this agonizing dying scene over and over again. That's the feel you get with this. But continuing in that, then you get the king and Esther, and they're kind of like in the palace watching the fighting, and you realize, you know, the day is done. And how did you say it, Veronica?
Well, it's like he's talking, he goes, looks like it's going well. And she's like, yeah, it is. And he's like, they look like they're having a good time. What should we do? And she goes, well, let's keep going tomorrow.
He's like, great. My beautiful, precious flower, anything you want. It's just a silly conversation.
Right. Of, oh, hey, we killed everyone today. Let's keep killing tomorrow.
Sure.
Again, it's that whole exaggeration.
Right. But it also gives a reason for why Purim is celebrated on different days.
Right.
So you have two things. It's part of the exaggeration, but it also gives a little bit of, so it's okay that another city celebrates on a different day because this city did it 2 days instead of 1.
And so, Erica, as we keep going then, the battle's been won. This edict has been reversed, basically.
Yep.
We've got the Jews now. And so when you get to this part in chapter 9, we're changing.
Yep.
We're going from watching it happening, and you're seeing that old hand writing out this last part about talking about what's going on, why it's a day of feasting and fasting, and you hear a voice speaking the words that he's writing.
Yes.
And you can tell it's an elderly voice, and then it goes from the hand writing this out to an old man sitting there with like his grandchildren around, and he's describing and explaining, here's why we do this. Here's why we give gifts. Here's why we have a feast. Here's why it's 2 days.
Here's why we dress up. Here's why we're celebrating every year. And he's giving the quick synopsis of the story and the reasons behind all of it. And you realize we've jumped to our current time.
Right.
It's the storyteller telling it, passing on the tale that he's been writing down this whole time.
And so with that, we do get the introduction to this festival of Purim.
Yeah.
And I think you were saying earlier, before this, there's only been 7 festivals.
Right.
God gave 7 festivals.
In the book of Leviticus.
Yearly dates to come meet with God. Time to just be in his presence.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden we have people adding in a new festival.
Yep.
And there's a reason and significance. Do you want to talk about that, Erin?
Well, they need to have, why are we celebrating this? So they need a good reason to add another festival to the Lord's calendar.
Right.
And so this whole story has partially been to give you the reason. Here's why we're celebrating it. And here's why we're continuing to celebrate it every year forever. It's kind of like an Independence Day celebration. Mm-hmm. You know, for any country, when you're celebrating your Independence Day, you're not celebrating the fact that you killed enemies. Mm-hmm. That's not the focus. The focus is on the fact that you won, you survived, you're still here, and you have freedom and liberty in life. And so that's what Purim is about. It's not, yay, we killed all our enemies. It's about, no, we're still here. Mm-hmm. We succeeded. We're alive. We have freedom, life, and liberty, and that's why we're celebrating. So I think you pointed out, Veronica, they don't celebrate on the 13th of Adar.
Right.
It's the 14th. It's the day after. Mm-hmm.
When the battle's been won.
Right, when the battle's been won. We're celebrating that we're still here. Mm-hmm. And then in a walled city, you celebrate on the 15th of Adar, which I think right now Jerusalem might be the only walled city where they celebrate on the 15th. And that's because of that second day where Xerxes and Esther were like, woohoo, let's do it again, boys.
Looks like fun. Keep going.
One more time. Another round. And so that's the point. Mm-hmm. You're celebrating victory that you survived.
Because you go back to what I said at the beginning of this podcast, the Jews have never had the luxury to ask why they have enemies. They've just always had enemies. Right. And what was fascinating is one of the commentaries I read said the significance of the holiday and
you can probably hear her notes on that.
And the message of Esther's story was not lost on the Nazis, who would kill on the spot any Jew in the prison camp possessing a copy of the Book of Esther. Now let me ask you, Erica, did they take the Book of Esther with them when they went into the prison camps? No, they were able to write it from memory because the story of Esther was more precious to the Jews facing mass death because they found assurance and hope that they, not their enemy, would triumph against all expectations.
Right.
To be a people group and go, you know what? Here's partly why the story of Esther is included. Because God's people have always been under attack.
Yeah.
And so God's reminding them, I've got this.
Right. I did it once before. Mm-hmm. I can do it again.
Mm-hmm. I am holding you. I am bringing you through as a people group, not an individual. It's not individual promises of you'll survive this.
Right. Because many didn't.
But as a people group, this story of Esther gives hope.
Yep. And I think we're going to talk about that more next week as we wrap up. You know, 'cause why wasn't God's name mentioned? We've hit on that a little bit.
Right.
But we really want to dig more into that. Mm-hmm. What is the point of the story? Why can it bring such hope to the Jewish people in the Holocaust? Mm-hmm. Why can it bring such hope to believers today, whatever we're going through? Mm-hmm. Why can this book be an amazing thing when God's name is not even mentioned?
Right. Right. It would seem like a very... the most unreligious book in the Bible, the most unreligious story. God's not even there.
And there were people that wanted to pull it out of Scripture. Mm-hmm. So it's we're going to dive into that though next week.
Yes.
So yes, the story is basically done.
Yes.
But come back as we pull out like, okay, what does this mean today? For believers, for people when you're struggling.
Right.
What does it mean?
Right. So, thanks for joining us. This is the Context and Color of the Bible podcast. As always, we're on social media. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love for you if you could go onto iTunes and rate and review us because, again, that pushes us up so that other people can hear these lessons as well. Goodbye.
Bye.